I think it's very fair and safe to say at this point that The View is by far the worst program on live television. And the reason why I say live television, unlike late night television, these actual shows such as The View, they're actually live on air. They're not pre-taped or anything like that. So you have hosts like Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, and Sunny Hostin saying some of the most ridiculous things out there, and even going as far to politicize the whole Charlie Kirk assassination multiple times, either on air or off air, and how it's already backfiring on ABC in the worst way possible for them. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, one thing about ABC and Disney, the Walt Disney Company, is that we all know that they're very incompetent. They are deliberately going into politics, turning all of their shows, movies, and television programs to be politically driven. That's why for so many years, a lot of their projects backfired, and why they lost a lot of customers, whether it was for Disney Plus or for theatrical movies and more on top of that. However, focusing on The View in isolation, we know that Sunny Hostin is by far one of the worst television hosts of all time out there, and for obvious reasons why. Now, what's interesting here has a lot more to do with exactly what Sunny Hostin recently did, and exactly how it's already beginning to backfire not just on ABC executives and producers, but also on Disney CEO Bob Iger. Let's get into this. Now, one thing about all of this is that for sure, yes, we know that a lot of those in the media have been trying to politicize the Charlie Kirk assassination, the entire situation that took place on September 10th, and it's only been making matters worse for the entire mainstream media for the most part, right? However, ever since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a number of those in Hollywood and in the media have been taking advantage of what happened on September 10th to push their political agenda and anti-Trump messaging. One major development going on now involves more to do with the hosts of The View, Whoopi Goldberg, Sunny Hostin, and Joy Behar, where backlash sparked behind the scenes just before the show went on the air in front of a live audience, after they once again tapped into a debate about the Charlie Kirk assassination. Now, a crucial update to this entire situation involves how for the second time now, the audience of The View decided to heckle the hosts after they brought up a debate on whether or not the violence in this country and how it led to Charlie's death was caused by MAGA and Trump's policies. This brief exchange was actually reportedly started by no other than Sunny Hostin, who decided to bring up the quick subject. It turns out that some of the audience members that participated in the free taping decided to call out Sunny Hostin from afar and the rest of the hosts by labeling them as unprofessional and called for them to get off the stage. The heckling got so bad for the hosts of The View to the point that Sunny Hostin decided to step in first, where she was delivering remarks where she shouted that security would be escorting them out of the building soon for delaying production. This is when ABC executives and producers decided to step in on stage before The View went on the air to advise the host to get off the stage for a brief moment. The hecklers reportedly didn't stop after this and also decided to shout "get off the stage" multiple times again. This is when ABC producers were waving over Sunny Hostin and the rest of the hosts, where Sunny was the first to walk off the stage, where she yelled "shame on you all" as she was forced to be taken off stage by the producers. This is when Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg were also forced to walk off stage and off the entire set, to go, of course, behind the set to take a break until security escorted the hecklers from the building. Now get this, it turns out that what ticked off Sunny Hostin the most is that some of the hecklers were actually wearing Trump attire, Trump t-shirts specifically under hoodies that were revealed once they were actually unzipped. Something that ABC prohibits to begin with, as no politically driven clothing is allowed for shows like The View. Now guys, let me just stop right there for a second. Now this is a true thing, by the way. You're not supposed to wear anything that is politically motivated attire or anything like that on a show like The View or anything like the Jimmy Kimmel Live show, for example. That's just how it is. But that's exactly what ticked off Sunny Hostin in the end. Now, one thing about all of this is that this is the second time now where The View has been heckled off air. Now, this time it wasn't in between commercials, it was just before The View actually went on air. Last time it was during a commercial break, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually reportedly disastrous for ABC and Disney, because it really did actually create quite the delay for production of The View's latest episode. Now, one thing about all of this is that we already know that Sunny Hostin is quite egotistical. We also know that she's caught up in a lot of drama. She's caught up in a lot of trouble with her husband. We all know that how fraudulent her husband really is. However, as Sunny was escorted, she reportedly appeared teary-eyed and was wiping her face as she came back on set once the hecklers were removed ultimately from the building just before the latest episode aired, which explains why Sunny Hostin appeared to be very exhausted and tired on the most recent episode. Joy Behar, too, appeared very frightened at times during the taping of the newest episode. As a result of this, Sunny Hostin is now under constant supervision when on the set of The View, and already Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, and Disney board members are already discussing on a possible replacement of Sunny Hostin as soon as possible to boost ratings for the program on ABC. Now guys, let me say one thing about that real quick. Do I think Sunny Hostin is going to get the boot in 2025? I highly doubt it. Let's be very real about this. She's not going anywhere this year. But for 2026, that's where things really begin to settle in differently. What's so very different about 2026 is that this is the very year that Bob Iger plans to step down as CEO. And the board is ready for a change. They're ready for a new CEO next year. Bob Iger wants to call it quits. So that's when you could very well see a major shift with who actually is going to be a part of The View and exactly who's going to actually run the show there. Now, this is the second time that Sunny Hostin caused trouble for The View, either during a commercial break or, in this case, just before the show started to go on air while the audience was seated. Now, this case in isolation, it did delay production by a couple of minutes. Now, we know one thing about Sunny Hostin, right? Is that she is very, like I said before, self-absorbed, egotistical. She is quite the hothead. If you ever challenge her, forget it. It's game over. That's when she basically loses all control and loses all self-control, I must say. Now, this is why a lot of those over at ABC, they are very panicky when it comes to Sunny Hostin and the subjects that she brings up, either on air or off air. And I don't even know why she's doing this off air, right? It really makes you question as to why she does things like this. But one thing is for certain right now is that Disney is in a lot of trouble when it comes to television, when it comes to their movies. We all saw what happened with Tron Ares, which was a box office disaster, and it's continuing to go in a downward spiral, by the way. And that just goes to show you that the basic, core customer base is just not there anymore. They're losing a lot of support, and people are moving to other studios or streaming platforms across the board. But overall, I would love to hear what everyone has to say about Sunny Hostin, The View entirely, the hosts of The View like Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, etc., and everyone else in between running the show. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.